Madam Chairwoman, thank you, and Mr. Secretary, thank you, sir. Thank you for your many, many years of service. Thank you for your patience today as we've had votes and other responsibilities. And though you and I might see the world differently in some respects, and politically we may not agree on everything, I do respect the leadership that you are providing and the administration in that. In framing my question, I'd like to tell you that I spent 14 years as an Air Force pilot, as a military officer. During that time, I was the pilot rep for the implementation of START Treaty with the former Soviet Union. It was a great experience. I learned a lot. One of the things I learned from my military experience in general, from that experience with the START Treaty, and frankly from some of my experience here in Congress, is that for a treaty or an agreement to work, there has to be a modicum of trust between the two parties. They may be adversaries, they may not like each other, but both of them must want the treaty to be successful, and again, for there to be some element to trust. And to return to a topic that we've discussed here, but I'd like to pursue it in a slightly different way, I'm not sure that we have that trust with Iran. And let me explain what I mean by that. Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism. They've been recognized as such for more than 30 years. Hezbollah, Hamas, the list of them working against our interest is very long. And so I would ask, I think, to you, sir, two questions. I could go on for quite a long time telling you what you already know, that they have been, and I think view us as an enemy in many regards, perhaps in most regards. They have a long list of working against our interests. Can you give me a single example of where they have worked with us as a partner or with any of our allies in a constructive way? And the second question would be, how do we reconcile the damage that I believe this has done with our primary partner in the area, and that would be our friend of Israel, and their suspicions of these negotiations, and whether we protect their interest as well?
Well, first, let me begin, Congressman. I want to thank you for your service. I really appreciate, like everybody does, anybody who puts on the uniform and spends a few years.
I got to tell you, flying jets was a lot more fun than what I do now.
As a pilot, since I was in college, only out of currency since I've been Secretary of State, I agree with you. Let me just say to you that you raised two issues there. Is there any issue where they've worked with us? Well, they're working with us on this right now. They put the interim agreement in place over a year ago now. It's about, I think it was around November, we cut the treaty, the deal, not a treaty. So it's been more than a year. They've done everything they said they would do in the context of that. They have also kept secret those things that we thought needed to be kept secret as we work through, you know, what could be a final agreement. I mean, we operate under the rule, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And that means that whatever we may have agreed over here, we got to keep, because it may require one or the other to say yes to something that may not be very popular back home, but may be defensible. But it isn't defensible till you have the whole agreement. They have not burned us with respect to that, nor we them. And that has facilitated a kind of dialogue that's pretty direct and open, and allows us now to bear down on some of these things. They recognize we have difficulties, we recognize they have difficulties, and we all have bottom lines. That's in any negotiation. So the interim agreement is one example of trying to work together on something. Now, there are some things they've done that help us, but we're not coordinating with them. We're not working on it. We haven't asked them to do it. But for instance, fighting ISIL. They're totally opposed to ISIL. And they are, in fact, taking on and fighting and eliminating ISIL members along the Iraqi border near Iran, and have serious concerns about what that would do to the region and so forth. So we have at least a mutual interest, if not a cooperative effort. But in the end, I emphasize to you, your second question was how to reconcile the damage that they may have done or that they could do to Israel in this. That's making a presumption, if you don't mind my saying so, that we're not going to have a deal here that in our judgment will absolutely protect Israel. It's not just Israel, by the way. It's us. It's every country in the region. And it's not just us at the table trying to do this. People need to focus on this. Russia is as adamant as we are that Iran cannot engage in proliferation activities. China is at the table. China has been helpful in this process, as has Russia, by the way. Even in the midst of the fight over Ukraine, Russia is working to help hold Iran accountable and get a favorable agreement, as is China. And then we have Germany, France, Great Britain, all at the table, all is equally concerned about where this goes. Then you have all the countries in the region, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Emiratis, Kuwaitis, Jordanians. They all have a stake in this. So we're not flying by the seat of our pants, nor are we proceeding in a solo basis here. And everybody understands the implications of the potential of their having a nuclear weapon. Israel's not the only country. Others worry about it. So they all want to see that we are trying to negotiate an agreement which will meet a high standard of accountability and eliminate the 4 pathways to a bomb. The Natanz pathway, the Iraq pathway, the Fordow pathway, and then, of course, the potential of a covert pathway. Now, that's complicated. We have to proceed, but you have to also measure this, I say carefully, against alternatives. Presumptions may be being made here by some people that there's an alternative way that you somehow get them to, it's like Men in Black. You can hold up a little flash pen and flash it, and they'll forget everything they've learned about fuel cycle or nuclear weapons or nuclear production, peaceful nuclear production. You think that's going to happen? Is there any notion of reality in anybody's mind that says that we're going to negotiate a deal where they have eliminated all of their know-how? And if you don't have verification and if you don't have insight as to what they're doing, there's a greater likelihood they dig deeper under a mountain and do something that you don't know. And you wake up one day and boom, they do have something. So you got to ask yourselves, what are the real alternatives here? I hear people talk about dismantlement. I mentioned the Bush administration from 2003 on, where their deal was no enrichment, but they just enriched away, and they centrifuged away, and they went from 164 to 19,000. They did that while they had sanctions, while there was a prohibition on the policy, while there was a UN resolution. And so you got to stop and say, what is the best way to be able to guarantee they don't get a bomb for the period of time to build to the future as we begin to change a lot of other things, hopefully. Now, I'll tell you this. I'm not going to go into all of it now. I want us to see if we have a deal before I put all the arguments out there. But I'm telling you there are many more arguments than have been heard about why this is important, and there are many more arguments than you will probably hear next week. And we need to wait and see what deal we have before you can really measure what it is that is at stake here and what the options are and how you feel about it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.